Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got some more Traumatize Them Back for you all. If you're unfamiliar with this subreddit, the best way that I can explain it is a revenge-type subreddit that involves usually reversing the situation and mildly traumatizing the subject of revenge.
So if you drink Gamer Subs, use code EYES at checkout. Every purchase made helps me directly.
This one's brought to us by KeyDentist6421. Pilots try to make me nervous about flying. Hi, I'm new here. I have a story set way back in 1998, when a person could still smoke on selective flights and being asked up to the cockpit was a normal thing. I was a fresh-faced 22-year-old woman who was getting on a plane to go from Burma to England. I had just broken up with a boyfriend whom I had left the relative comfort of my home country, New Zealand, to be with. I was a bit of an emotional mess, but I decided to not go home, but instead to go to England to do my big OE, like so many New Zealanders do. I had to Google what OE meant because I'm from Idaho, and it means overseas experience. Yeah, definitely would not have known that. I stepped on the plane and noticed that it was only half full. Great, I can wallow in my misery in a corner somewhere. But as I walked onto the plane, I heard a familiar and comforting accent. The pilots greeting the passengers were Australian. I say hello, and they, appreciating a familiar accent, invite me to the cockpit for both the takeoff and landing. I was offered a first-class meal in the cockpit and a first-class seat for the flight. I'm in the cockpit and I notice that the pilots are having a conversation about how drunk they have gotten the night before, and how they had gotten no sleep. One was lamenting about how he had been called in, right in the middle of a good night out. I caught them smiling at each other and loving how uncomfortable and frightened they were making me. So, the head pilot turned to me and asked me if I had been on many flights. I looked at him straight in the eye and said, "No, I tend to stay off airplanes because my mother died in an airplane crash a few years ago. This is only my second flight since that happened."
Oh, you could have heard a pin drop.
It is true, by the way. She died in 1995 in a crash that happened in New Zealand. In the end, at least I got first-class service and a story to tell you all. Also a memory of when we could wander onto a plane, have a cigarette, and visit the pilots in the cockpit. It's always odd to hear stories of the times when pilots didn't have double-shielded blast doors protecting them and you could smoke on a plane. Personally, I don't think I could survive because my lungs and allergies would try to fucking kill me if I was on a plane with cigarette smoke for that long. Definitely not a fan of that. You do you. I grew up with smokers, so I'm used to it and I understand it, but I can't personally handle that kind of stuff, man. Only a cruel and unforgiving deity would make one of the hottest things a human can do into one of the most foul-smelling possible things to accompany it. It's just messed up, man. Liv Hannah. Parents took my sister to Disneyland, but left me. I found out about it later. Actually, in hindsight, it's a terribly sad story, but when it was happening, I thought I was striking back in hard at the people who had hurt me. I had a so-so childhood. On one hand, we never lacked anything materially, but we had a very complicated family situation. After the divorce, my mother took me, while my father took my sister. The worst part for me was that I grew up in a home with two abusive, cruel people, my mother and stepfather, and my sister grew up with my very sensitive and kind father and a gentle and good stepmother. So I kind of felt like I had lost and she had won the lottery called parents. But of course, it wasn't her fault. Nobody's fault. Fate, chance, the foolishness of adults. We all, both families, had an arrangement that we, sisters, would always be taken on vacations together. That means if my mother and stepfather wanted to take me somewhere, they would take my sister too, and vice versa. When my father and his wife went somewhere, they would take me along with my sister. The idea was for us to stay in touch, but also to avoid favoring either of us. But I had a dream. I desperately wanted to go to Disneyland. I asked for it many times, but there was never an opportunity. It didn't really matter because we traveled to different countries, and even within our country, we went to very interesting and beautiful places. In that regard, I really couldn't complain. Until one day, for some reason I don't even remember, I was alone at my father's house. Hours passed, and this was a time when you could only have internet via phone cable, so, out of boredom, I reached for the shelf with the photo albums.
Yes, back in the day, our photos were kept in albums.
That was a mean voice to do. I was browsing through various memories until I came across some photos. My father and his wife had taken my sister to Disneyland, and they didn't take me. My probably then 15-year-old heart broke. It must have happened a good 2 or 3 years earlier, and no one told me. Not even my sister. They just kept it a secret? I flipped through page after page and cried, photo after photo. How happy they looked. I cried, like a lot. But time passed and I put the albums back on the shelf. I actually wanted to talk to them about it, ask about it. But when they came back, my sister was elsewhere, only the adults returned. They asked how I was feeling and if I had been bored. And I just couldn't start the subject, so I said I had been wandering around the apartment, picked up a few books, which was true, and then started looking at the photos. I was hoping for some reaction, but they probably didn't even remember what photos were there, so they were happy. And did you have a good time? I was stunned, and I decided to start testing them now. Well, great, I said, but I'd like to look at the photos with you because I don't remember everything. Will you tell me about some of the pictures? Sure, they both replied. And my father reached for the first album from the shelf, with the oldest photos. I had the impression he hesitated, but he understood what was hidden 3 albums further down, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he invited me to the kitchen. We'll look at them there, he said. We'll make some coffee and tea and we can talk. But I don't want to, I said. It's so comfortable here, on the couch. There's only chairs in the kitchen. Then we'll go to another room, my father said, literally lifting me up by the shoulders and leading me away. I gave in. Okay, let it be. I already know what you're doing, and you don't yet know what I'm doing, I thought. They both sat next to me, him and her, and we looked at the photos from the first album. Next, I said when we finished that one, and so on, until they said there were no more. I replied. Impossible. There was a red one on the shelf, and there's no red one here. Something's missing. No, my father replied. There's nothing else there. Oh, of course there is. I shouted like a 5-year-old and ran to the room before anyone could stop me. And there was no album. They had already hidden it. I returned to them and asked where the red album was. And they said they never had a red album, that I was mistaken, and that it was time for dinner. I said nothing. I looked them in the eyes, searching for any understanding, some truth. Both were sweating, stressed as hell, but the thought of finally getting out of this uncomfortable situation, going to make dinner, saved them. I stayed the night because I had no choice, and in the morning, just before leaving, I left a photo on the bed that I had taken while browsing. A photo of the 3 of them, smiling, happy, at Disneyland. All while I experienced abuse from my parents almost every day. About 15 minutes after I left, the calls from my father and stepmother started, but I didn't answer. For 2, maybe even 3 years, I didn't answer. My heart was broken. Later, we reconnected, and today we live quite normally and in friendship. I forgave them long ago, but somehow I just can't forget. I mean, yeah, you were fucking betrayed. That stings. A lot. God damn. I'm going to have to pose this question to the audience here because I grew up an only child and my parents divorced. So for me, originally when growing up, it was 2 days on, 2 days off, 3 days on, 2 days off, 2 days on, 3 days off. This way each parent would essentially get me for an equal amount of time over a period of 2 weeks. This later changed when I turned around 8 to week on, week off. But with siblings, why isn't it just that one parent gets both siblings at the same time and the other one gets, a week off without the siblings? Why are they choosing one specific sibling to raise in an entirely different environment? That doesn't, to me that doesn't make sense. Maybe to someone who's been in this situation that does make sense, but that does create situations like this where there's bound to be favoritism and there's bound to be events like this. This is actually really heartbreaking. So please, I know the criteria is a little bit odd, but if you have any experience with parents being divorced and growing up with a sibling and dealing with an alternating schedule, I would love to hear if segregating the siblings like this is normal, because this seems developmentally hell. Sheer cold, 12/28. She didn't think it would happen, but it did. Now everyone knows. Alright, first time posting here, and this probably isn't as crazy as some of the other posts here, but here we go. Now, for some context, I'm autistic, female, have a slew of other mental issues, and was diagnosed with both epilepsy and a migraine disorder back in 2016. The reason why this matters is because I had a lot of accommodations in place due to these issues, one of which being the ability to leave the building 5 minutes before a fire drill. This is extremely important. So this happened my senior year of high school, 2019. I was 18 years old at the time. It was just a normal April morning when I was told by a teacher that there would be a fire drill later in the day. This obviously caught me off guard and I began to worry, so I went to go see my in-school therapist. Let's call her BM. She lets me into her office and I voice my nervousness about the upcoming drill. Cue the usual, try to calm this person down tactic. That's when I say to her, I might have a seizure. Her response, no you won't. Now I'm going to have you leave with everyone else. Yes, you read that right. She outright decided to ignore my accommodation that had been followed for years just because she wanted to. Now I'm even more anxious, but her mind was made up and I couldn't change it. Time skipped to 12 o'clock and the fire alarm goes off. As instructed, I leave with the rest of my class and head from the second floor to the football field. While outside, I turn to a classmate and ask if my pulse is fast. She checks and says it's fine. That's good. Fire drill's over and we head back up to the second floor. While my teacher is getting ready to unlock the classroom door to let us back in, my vision goes black. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground. The nurse is helping me sit up while paramedics rush to get me onto a stretcher. Down the elevator, out of the school, into the ambulance, and straight to the hospital. Yep, I jinxed it. While waiting to get back into class, I ended up having a stress-induced grand mal seizure at school, something I was afraid of after being diagnosed. Needless to say, my parents were none too happy about what had happened, and BM was left with a permanent reminder to actually listen and not brush things off. But hey, on the bright side, I graduated almost 2 months earlier than everyone else due to the incident. It's stories like these that make me realize that my in-school counselor back when I was in high school was actually goated beyond belief. She was actually able to recognize signs of depressions in students before it actually hit them. She was fantastic with helping students navigate and mitigate their stress throughout life, and honestly, just goated all around. I have a memory of dealing with a teacher when I was dealing with my first job, and I was in fast food and having to deal with both an abusive boss and being forced to essentially kill mice with my bare hands or threaten being fired. I was too young to know to report the restaurant for health code violations or other things like that, so I just kind of had to deal with it. This was affecting my attitude in class. Obviously, it's not easy to come back after, hitting a mouse on a table and watching the life drain from its eyes. It fucks with you. I had not been desensitized to that kind of interaction yet. So when I was at school, it was definitely messing with my ability to appear happy. Now, in the specific class that I was in, they graded your professionalism. If you even looked unhappy, you would lose marks. You would end up going from an A to a B. Now me, being a 4.0 student, that was only more stress, because now I was stressing about whether or not I looked happy or not. And I told the counselor about this, and my grades suddenly changed for the better within a matter of moments, and that was pretty cool. It's actually nice having someone in your school who's willing to stand up for the students when bullshit's awry. Green fawn enter. Teacher won't let me drink water in class, so I gave him a detailed description of my medical issues. Some context first. This happened when I was in high school, so a little over 10 years ago. I am French. So, that was... I don't know why I did that. I am French, so sorry in advance for any mistakes or weird phrasing. The teacher I'll be talking about was my French teacher, so I think it'd be the same thing as an English teacher is in the US, UK, English-speaking countries. For various reasons, I went to a private high school, which in France often means religious high schools. We didn't have Catholicism classes or anything like that, but there was the option to have faith breakfasts before class to discuss religion and faith, and things like that. But the main difference with French public high school are the rules. Stricter dress code, skirt and shorts not above knee level. No shorts or open shoes for boys, no cleavage allowed, no tank tops, no piercings, even on the ears, etc. A no phone on school ground policy. And, of course, no drinking or eating during class. Not even water, because there has been cases of students putting clear alcohol instead of water in their bottles. Now, to the story. So I was around 17 and I recently had urinating pain, feeling like cystitis, urinary tract infection. After analysis and a bladder ultrasound, I was relieved that I had crystals in my bladder. This was the beginning of renal calculus, so obstruction of my urinary tract, and if not treated, I could end up with kidney stones before turning 18. I don't have the best of health, but even I was shocked. The treatment? Drinking a lot, and a lot. And then again, a lot of water, with low calcium in it, and hope it would suffice. The school policy was no drinking in class. not even water, but most of the teachers were lenient because in the high school and in most French schools, there's no AC. So in the summer, you don't want the kids to get dehydrated, or worse, have heat strokes occurring, because small private high school means no infirmary. So during the first half of the day, I had my little water bottle and would take sips regularly, refill it while taking a bathroom break between classes. Then the afternoon begins with 2 hours of French class. I put down my papers and pens, then my water bottle, and the teacher immediately says loudly in a condescending tone, "You know, miss, my family name, that no drinks or food are allowed in class." I try to ask for an exception, but he interrupts me, still condescending. "You surely can manage 2 small hours without drinking. It's not like it'll kill you." Looking back, it probably wouldn't have killed me, but I was 17, in pain because of the crystals, and really stressed at the idea of having kidney stones, because I heard the pain is worse than giving birth, and I'm sensitive to pain. So, as the class was not yet started, and not everyone was seated, I went to the teacher's desk to talk more privately. "I know, sir, that not even water is allowed in class, but I had a urine analysis and a bladder ultrasound very recently that showed crystals inside my bladder. The doctor urgently encouraged me to drink 2 or 3 times more water, or I could have calculus in my kidneys before graduation. I have pain medication in the meanwhile to help me going to the toilets without crying because it burns like hot razors when I urinate, but it doesn't remove all the pain, and I'm really scared for my health, as nephrocolic would mean hospitalization and missing class, so I'm really sorry to insist, but could you please make an exception, at least until my health is better?" He was dumbfounded and looked embarrassed, then stuttered a bit before saying, "Oh, okay, fine, I hope you'll be okay." Between the amount of medical terms I just threw at him and the seriousness of the matter, he had no way of denying me a poor water bottle. For the rest of the day, he wouldn't look at me. Why is the socioeconomic status of the water bottle important? For the rest of the day, he wouldn't look me in the eyes, and I think he passed the news to my other teachers, because some of them would look at me with sympathy even though I never told any other teacher. Might sound stupid, but to this day I'm proud of myself, because that teacher was really not agreeable, and I was a people pleaser and a doormat, but I stood my ground that day. A lot of this could have probably just been avoided if they didn't have the no water in class policy, and if I'm gonna be honest with you, the whole thing of students putting clear alcohol in bottles during class, I always assumed that was a myth because one, you're gonna be able to smell it. Who the hell is just drinking straight fucking vodka or hard liquor from a bottle? Because I can't think of many other alcohols that are clear like water that you'd be able to pass off as water, and I don't think there's many high schoolers just sipping on straight vodka during class. I understand that you Europeans have different rules when it comes to alcohol that us American minds can't comprehend, but still, is that common? For just like in Europe maybe? For students to put clear alcohol in water bottles? Like, is that just something that happens out there? Because I've never seen it here in the US, personally. It might happen here, and maybe I'm just a sheltered little bitch that doesn't pay attention to his classmates to his snitching point. I don't know. That one pansexual. One. Or not even the first, they're actually the second. I told you to let me go down to the nurse. I don't know if this really goes here, but I don't know where else to put it. For context, I have an extremely bad tree nut allergy. My reaction also doesn't set in until 30 minutes to an hour later. My reaction is literally not being able to breathe or having a very hard time breathing depending on the nut, and also hives, before ending off on puking my guts out if I'm lucky enough, or fainting/dying if I'm unlucky. I also didn't have an EpiPen at the time because it's too expensive, and my parents' insurance did not cover it. The teachers would also loudly proclaim each of the students who had allergies' names and what their allergy was, so everyone in the school knew I had a tree nut allergy. Story. Some of my classmates decided to be funny to give me a Nutella brownie during lunch. I did not know that it had Nutella in it. Science was the next class after lunch, so I went to class thinking nothing was wrong. I was paying attention until suddenly I had a very weird feeling that I was very familiar with. I tried brushing it off as accidentally eating something bad or just being a little sick, but then it got worse. I raised my hand and asked the science teacher if I could go down to the nurse. She said no because I looked fine and she was giving an important lecture. At this point, I started having difficulties with breathing. I started telling her that I can't breathe, and she brushed it off as just some attention-seeking stunt. This was during the BLM protests, and I'm black. At this point, other students that I was friends with and knew the signs of my allergic reaction started telling her to let me go to the nurse. I felt like I was about to puke, so I walked up to the front of the room and used hand motions to ask to go to the bathroom. She told me to sit back down. Just as she told me that, I puked all over her and her shirt. She started screaming at me and asking what the fuck was wrong with me, and I think she even said that I was gonna get suspension. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I told you to let me go to the nurse," before coughing a lot. I went down to the nurse after that, and she shot me with the EpiPen that's in her office. I got sent home after that, but my friends texted me that the nurse and vice principal told off the science teacher. My friends and I also got free snacks from the vice principal for good behavior, and the rest of my science class and teacher got to have after-school lessons on allergies and medical conditions in general. The kids who gave me the brownie got suspended and expelled later for stealing $50 from another student. I think a good chunk of this kind of does boil down to whether or not the teacher knew you were having an allergic reaction, or if she just thought you were, like she has probably seen in the past, faking an illness to get out of class during a lecture. I don't know, doesn't excuse all of the teacher's behavior, but it could be a reason for it. I do think that if the kids knew that they were giving you a spiked brownie, that they should probably get charges for that, because that could have been attempted murder. I am sometimes sympathetic towards teachers because I know they kind of have a lot on their plate and they're underfunded and they're dealing with a lot, and you never know which students are faking it or just trying to get out of class. But as for the kids, yeah, I got no pity for that. Sophia Alvin Kitten, keep touching my wheelchair when I've told you no, get slapped and shunned. Oh no, it's the consequences of your actions. I'm a wheelchair user. Wheelchairs are considered extensions of our bodies, and touching their chair without permission is a no-no. Moving someone's wheelchair without asking is an even bigger no-no. I'd explained to a classmate, again and again, all that it was rude, inappropriate, and even harassment that he kept touching my chair or moving me without asking, and when I told him not to, he not only kept doing it, but he was insistent that he had the right to do so. I'd even gone as far as to illustrate the issue to him by getting permission to touch his shoulder or elbows and moving him out of the way, or leaving my hands on his shoulders and leaving them there until it was awkward. Even this didn't dissuade him or change his entitled insistence that he had the right to touch my chair whenever he wanted to, when I told him no. But usually, he'd let go, kind of scoff, and move on. This was over the course of most of a college semester. It was a voice class at community college, so there were less than 20 of us, so our professor had witnessed many of these incidents. One day, when he touched my chair again and wouldn't move his hand when I politely asked him to stop, he refused to let go and insisted that he wasn't doing anything wrong and that he had the right to do so, it wasn't a big deal, etc. I had had enough, and that he had continued to touch me, my chair, and extension of my person, etc., etc. I turned my chair around lightning fast, grabbed his stunned hand hard enough to hopefully bruise. I've got good upper body and hand grip strength. Pulled him down as harshly as I could and then slapped him in the face hard. The rest of the class heard the slap and his pained and surprised yelp and turned to look at us. He screamed and ran over to the professor to whine that I'd grabbed him and hit him. The professor just kind of shrugged and said something along the lines of, "She told you to stop touching her." He kept whining about it to the professor that I'd be punished for assaulting him, etc., only for the professor and the rest of the class to just ignore him that day, and for the rest of the semester. Mind you, I'm a very chill person, unless you count childlike excitement, glee about life, that kind of stuff, and am never violent, as well as being patient to a fault, so I don't retaliate nearly ever or easily, but frankly, this was self-defense, pure and simple. In any case, the whole class had heard me explain time and time again not to touch me or my chair, and how and why it was inappropriate, and had asked if I needed help, but I'd always declined. To me personally, it's not that big of a deal if someone who doesn't know better touches my wheelchair. I just explain why it's wrong, but that he was so entitled that he had the right to and wouldn't take no for an answer was what made it an actual issue. And I'd been much more patient than he deserved because he was not very bright, but not disabled or autistic. I'd asked about the autism because in a polite way by sharing that I'm autistic, and even if he were, he would be high functioning enough for it to be inexcusable. At the end of the class that day, I got a lot of high fives and he kept distance from me, occasionally glancing over at me fearfully. The last third or so of the semester, and no one wanted to work with him when we were paired up in groups of 3 to 4 to work on songs together. People for the most part didn't love working with him before, but after, it became clear that the professor was on my side, not his. It was as if he was invisible. Okay, I got a really embarrassing and almost shameful story to tell from when I was 16 and volunteering. So Idaho has this thing called Shakespeare at the park, and I volunteered as kind of like a, I think I would actually classify it as a bellhop. I had volunteered as kind of a bellhop where I would help people to their seats. This is an amphitheater, so there are stairs. We might be able to see where this is going. And it's kind of, most of it's ramped up, but there's kind of stairs going up and down. And I received no training, just look at their tickets, guide them to their seat. I didn't know what my options were, I didn't know how to handle anything, and I volunteered because it meant I got to watch Shakespeare for free, but at the same time it also counted for community hour credits for my school. So here's the bad part. This guy and his family came through. He was in a wheelchair. Their seat was at the very, very top of the stairs, and I had no training to deal with it. I didn't know what my options were, and I look back at this and I cringe hard because my first thought was, oh, can you guys just like carry him up there? This moment haunts me to this day, and I feel guilt about it to this day, but eventually we did manage to get one of the actual park owners and to come down and be like, oh yeah, no, this is fucked up. Let's get you like an actual seat to like, you know, that's within range. Basically, they got a seat upgrade and, you know, all was well, but I still just every now and then just look back at that and just with pure, just fearful cringe, remember that and the looks on all of their faces and the backtracking that a 16-year-old me had to do. Oh, I didn't know any better, but I'm still sharing it because it's funny, but it hurts.
Princess Torrington. An SFW. Unfortunately, my daughter being dead is always a trump card. Oh god. What a quirky name followed up by an incredibly depressing title.
There have been several similar conversations, but the first time was when a drunk bloke in the pub told my husband and I that our dog was spoiled and tried to peg us as rich, child-free, carefree people obsessed with their dog who probably hate kids, paraphrasing slightly as he was drunk and not making total sense. Me. Yeah, he's pretty spoiled. He deserves it though for getting us through the death of our daughter a few months ago. I don't think we would have managed without him, so he deserves all the treats, to be honest. The drunk bloke seemed to die a little inside and tried to backtrack and apologize. Moral of the story, don't presume anything about other people's lives. Then a shh emoji. Well, shit. Yeah, that's... ugh. Well, I'm incredibly sorry for your loss, Princess Toadington. I'm very happy that you have a dog, though, to keep you and your husband company. That's pretty cool. I'm a big fan of that. Not the dog part, of course. I'm not good at this, alright? I'm so sorry. Please continue to dunk on the drunk blokes who wander around and assume things about people. And make sure your dog gets lots of love. Please. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code OZ at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code OZ directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code OZ at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.